Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 11, Day 5. Today, you do not have a journal, so we're going to pick up directly with notes, and we're going to be talking about McCarthyism and the Red Scare. So yesterday, or at least with Day 4, we talked about the Red Scare and how that is kind of perpetuating fear in America over communism. And we talked about segregation and how that was also feeding into communism in the eyes of our president and President Truman. And we're going to continue kind of going through some of those things today as what is making Americans fearful of the quote unquote Reds. Now, here are your essential questions. Make sure you're keeping up with those. We'll try to answer those each day. And we want to talk about McCarthyism and the Red Scare as a whole and what that means. In the 50s, the most effective sanction was terror, and almost any publicity from the House on Un-American Activities meant the blacklist. And what that is, guys, there was this blacklist that got created where essentially people would put your name on it if you were even affiliated with communism. A witness would, suddenly find yourself without a job, without any way to clear your name, without any friends, and all because somebody accused you of being a communist. Didn't matter whether it was true or not, it just mattered that you were accused. And for a lot of years, that's going to be kind of the way it goes for a lot of actors, a lot of government officials, and anytime somebody didn't like something, they just accused it of being communistic. Now, the actual Red Scare was the paranoia of the infiltration of communism in America. Put that simply, it's the fear of communism spreading in America, okay, and the fear that it was actively spreading in America. Now, McCarthyism, the second term we want to look at today, is named after Senator Joseph McCarthy, and he was an anti-communist crusader. And what he did was he tried to use a lot of lies and accusations to try to smear reputations, and basically acted like he had this whole list of things that were, going to prove that he had the center of the communist conspiracy pegged and he was going to end it for all Americans. Okay. And one of the last things that he actually did was the Army McCarthy hearings, in which he failed miserably. Now, Joseph McCarthy, in February 1950, he was a Wisconsin senator, and he gave a speech to a women's club in West Virginia saying, "While I cannot take the time to name all the men in the State Department who have been named as members of the Communist Party, I have here in my hand a list of 205 that were known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party and who are still shaping the policy of the State Department." Now, the problem with this is no one ever really saw the list. We don't have the list today. We don't know what 205 names he actually said he had. However, he leads this long and wild witch hunt. Okay, and a witch hunt goes back to American One. We talked about Salem, of people trying to accuse people of witches. Were they actually witches? Obviously not. But they had all these weird, crazy, scary tactics trying to accuse people of that. And so McCarthy continues to make claims and charges and tries to draw a lot of attention to himself. And by 1952, he had turned his investigation into a large witch hunt, a search, which is just a search for disloyalty based on flimsy evidence. We already talked about that. His tactic and the tactic that he used during this time is known as McCarthyism, and it's the spreading of fear, making baseless charges that others were communist. All right, so he's actively going out and accusing other people of being communist, despite the fact that he doesn't really have a whole lot of evidence. Now, I'm not going to read these to you, but I'm going to pause for a second and let you be able to pause it on your screen. I want you to read these, okay? And these are things that people consider quote unquote un-American activities. And as you start to read them, you're going to realize these were not un-American activities. For example, I will read two of them. A foundation offered a $100,000 award for anyone who could invent a machine that would detect communists. I want you to think about that for a second. Okay, the last one, in Pasadena, a 3-year-old girl was hired as a model for an art class at a tax-supported college. Her mother was told she could not be paid until she signed a loyalty oath, since the little kid couldn't write yet. She was never paid. Now, in truth, most likely, they just didn't want to pay the little girl for the modeling. But by acting like that they were potentially communist, or that they were communist because they wouldn't sign a loyalty oath, it made it to where they could kind of skirt by. And people did this all the time during this period in history. The film industry, most of all, was patronized as much as anything. Um, you know, if you didn't watch the TV that the Reds were on, then you can drive them out of radio in Hollywood. Okay. And then you can read through this tract how it's telling you how to get rid of um, communism and Marxism and all these things that are all tied to um, communism. Now, the funny thing about it is, guys, is that a lot of these things eventually start to fizzle out and people begin to realize that you can be a communist if you want to. There's nothing in our laws that say you can't be a communist. Now, actively trying to subvert our government, that's completely illegal. Like, you can't be doing that. But being a communist, there's nothing wrong with it. However, the film industry specifically is going to become the center of the House on Un-American Activities. The committee's focus is going to be on the film industry, and they believe that um, these actors might use cultural forces to manipulate and uh, use these films to convert people to communism. By the end of it, eventually some 300 artists were boycotted until we have the Hollywood 10. And the Hollywood 10 were a group of actors who stood up against um, kind of this House on Un-American Activities. They were blacklisted and they stood up and said, this is not fair. We're not obviously communist, but we can be communist if we want to, etc. Some were even forced to leave the U.S. to work, such as Charlie Chaplin, who had been a famous actor to that point. And some even had to work under false names to try to get work. Now, Hollywood producers drew up blacklists of all the actors that could not be hired and agreed not to hire any of these people in the film industry. You could be blacklisted if you didn't agree to cooperate with the committee. So you had all these things that if you wouldn't go speak in front of the House on Un-American Activities Committee, you wouldn't sign a loyalty oath. Basically they're forcing people, in some ways they're blackmailing people into doing what they want them to do. Now, one of the big ones that got brought before the House on Un-American Activities Committee was Walt Disney. And that's, I always ask this question: have you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? So, House on American Activities said, can you name any other individuals that you believe were members of the Communist Party? Well, I feel that there's one in my plan that came in there. He came in about 1930, and he sort of stayed in the background. He wasn't too active, but he was the real brains of this, and I believe he is a communist. His name is David Hilberman. Now, here's the thing. You can read through the rest of this transcript, okay? Disney gives up this guy, okay, during his testimony. Well, guess what? Now Disney's free and clear because he gave somebody up. And that's the way they fed on names. And going forward, Ronald Reagan, who was also an actor, he was also the head of the Screen Actors Guild, okay, which is basically a group of actors that I think they give away the Oscar or something like that. But it's a group and a kind of organization for actors. He spoke on their behalf and tried to promote that, this was not communism. It's also going to be a stepping stone for him later on for his presidency and for him to be the governor of California. McCarthy's also going to begin taking his claims elsewhere, and this is going to be where he gets in trouble. In 1952, McCarthy attacked the U.S. Army, claiming that it was protecting communists, and that's not going to go over well because now you're attacking the American government itself. Television allowed all Americans to watch the trial and realized how unstable McCarthy actually was. With one person claiming, have you no decency? McCarthy, he's going to die from alcoholism 2 years later. The man was unstable. He had problems. But it goes back to the same thing you see in today's society. If you can get your voice heard and people will listen, you can make them believe anything. So your only vocabulary word today is McCarthyism. Please make sure you get that down. If you have any problems, please let me know. If not, I'll talk to you soon.